Welcome back, everyone. It appears as if the majority leader is hell-bent to try to break the Senate. His argument is that somehow state legislatures across the country are busily at work trying to make it more difficult for people to vote. Of course, that's not happening anywhere in America. 94% of Americans believe it's easy to vote. We had a record turnout last year, the biggest turnout since 1900. It's already against the law to prevent people from voting based upon race. The Voting Rights Act is still intact. So it's appropriate to ask the question, what's going on here? Well, there's been a lot of talk about big lies. Well, the big lie on the other side is that state legislatures controlled by Republicans are busily at work trying to make it difficult for people to vote. If you actually read the legislation that's been passed, it's clearly not the case. And so I think this is an excuse to try to break the Senate. Hypocrisy is not unheard of in politics, but about half the current members of the Democratic Party, when Donald Trump was president and we were in the majority, believed that the legislative filibuster was the essence of the Senate. So I guess where you stand depends upon where you sit. And we anticipate, based on what the majority leader said, that he's going to try to break the Senate, break the legislative filibuster, to make some kind of narrow exception. There is no such thing as a narrow exception. No such thing as a narrow exception. This, in my view, is genuine radicalism. And I might add, parenthetically, the executive calendar, a separate function of the Senate, was historically handled with a simple majority until the majority leader came to the Senate during Bush 43's tenure, after which he started routinely filibustering judges. Well, you've followed, we've gone back and forth about how to do the executive calendar. The executive calendar is now back to where it was 20 years ago. The legislative calendar is a totally different thing. So make no mistake about it, this is genuine radicalism. They want to turn the Senate into the House. They want to make it easy to fundamentally change the country. For example, admitting 2 new states, the District of Puerto Rico, to have 4 new Democratic senators, or to pack the Supreme Court. Fundamentally change the country. The filibuster has been a way to conduct American business in the political center. If you're a football fan, think of it as between the 40-yard lines. Unless either side gets a very large majority, it insists upon moderation and compromise. If you can't reach moderation and compromise on a particular issue, then it doesn't pass. That's been an important part of American history from the very beginning, and all of that's going to be on the line here, all of it on the line here, apparently, in the next 2 weeks.
And what the Majority Leader Schumer previously described what would happen if the filibuster was eliminated, he called it a doomsday for democracy. That's from the Majority Leader today, to just highlight the point that our leader just made. And he said that getting rid of the filibuster would make, and I quote, our country a banana republic where if you don't get your way, you change the rules, end quote. That's from Chuck Schumer just a few years ago. And this letter, to which the leader referred, was signed by a majority of the current sitting Democrat senators, basically saying getting rid of the filibuster would be terrible for the country. They came out in hard opposition back in 2017. And at the time, Republicans were under a lot of pressure, I think, as you know, from our former president to get rid of the legislative filibuster. We withstood that pressure because we believe the legislative filibuster is essential not only to the functioning of the Senate, but to the country, because it does provide, as Washington described, that cooling saucer where legislation, things can be cooled down, it gets away from the passions of the moment, creates stability, predictability, moderation, an opportunity for compromise, and where solutions can be found in the center, where you actually have to get Republicans and Democrats working together. It protects minority rights. It is the institution in our democracy that protects minority rights. And what they're talking about doing would create a nuclear fallout unlike anything we've seen. It's called the nuclear option for a reason. That's the reason it's been referred to around here, because everybody realizes what would happen if it ever gets triggered. And they think they can just carve one little thing out and this will all go away. Well, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. When you start getting rid of the legislative filibuster, carve out or otherwise, it's gone. It's a whole new ballgame around here. This would be disastrous for the United States Senate, the institution itself, and it would be disastrous for this country, because it would ensure that in the future, every Senate that comes in would reverse what the previous Senate has done, and you would get into this partisan back and forth, which would make the Senate no different than the House of Representatives and undermine the very essence of what the founders intended the Senate to be all about. So I hope that they will, as the leader pointed out, decide and exercise better judgment, which they did just a few years ago when we had the presidency and when we were majority in the Senate, and get back to legislating the way that this place is supposed to work, and that is in a bipartisan way. Get away from this, partisan, scorched earth strategy they have right now of trying to move their agenda in a partisan way and work with Republicans in a constructive way on the issues that are important to the American people.
Well, as we enter 2022, the undeniable truth is that Joe Biden as president is overwhelmed and ineffective. And the vice president, his backup quarterback, it seems every time she touches the ball, it's either a fumble or throws an interception. And the reason I say that is the American people have just lived through the most expensive Christmas ever. In terms of if they were driving to go visit family or friends, the price of gasoline at the pump on Christmas Day was the highest it's ever been on a Christmas day in America. The cost of a gallon of gas is $1 a gallon higher this Christmas than it was last Christmas. And it's not just gasoline. It's Christmas gifts, it's groceries for Christmas. People around the country are struggling and suffering, and the president and vice president think that all they need to do is maybe wave a magic wand and things would get better. That's not the case. The vice president was on CBS, a national news show, the day after Christmas. She was asked about inflation and asked if it was transitory, because remember, for month after month after month, the administration and the vice president, President all said that inflation was transitory. They kept saying it until we hit a 40-year high of inflation. It wasn't a trick question, yet her answer was incoherent and rambling. And by all indications, inflation is going to get even worse coming into this new year. We talked about people who could travel to see friends and family over the holidays, but for many people they couldn't because of the new variant of coronavirus. Many, many people have tested positive. That's if they can even find tests to take. You've seen the lines going around buildings in city after city all around the country because they can't even find adequate testing. Well, Joe Biden had been so obsessed with his vaccine mandate that he ignored requests for more testing and working on treatment. Lots of money has been spent on that. Hundreds and hundreds of millions, actually billions of dollars was put into testing in coronavirus bills, including the one that they passed on a party line vote in March, which was supposed to be about coronavirus relief. And yet, there are not adequate tests in America today. This is what Joe Biden has done to this country. As we go into Joe Biden's second year as president, we have a president who's failed. He's failed on the economy, failed on COVID, failed at the border, and failed on issue after issue, including crime in our cities. The American people deserve better. This president has failed.
Well, the Biden administration in its first year passed fewer pieces of legislation than any administration in decades. Actually, about 81 bills were signed into law, 94 under President Trump, 124 under Obama, 109 under George W. Bush. The reason is not the rules, though. The reason is they decided early that they wanted to focus on doing everything that they wanted to do and doing it exactly the way they wanted to do it by doing it themselves. The first bill, the 1.9 American Recovery Act, did a lot of damage to an economy that was already recovering. They got a bipartisan win with the infrastructure bill that I voted for and 18 other Republican senators voted for, but then immediately participated with the House in an effort where the House was going to hold it hostage until they could get enough Senate Democrats to vote for the really big bill that was all kinds of other things and all kinds of new entitlements. At the end, that didn't happen, and they finally went ahead and the House passed the bill we had passed months before. The problem here is not the rules of the Senate. The problem here is acting like you've got a huge mandate when you've barely got a majority in any of the House, the Senate, or a president who was elected not because he had a big mandate to do things, but for totally other reasons. This election wasn't about mandate. He said it was about competence. It was about ability to govern from the middle. Neither one of those have proven to be exactly the way the administration has functioned, and particularly no interest in governing from the middle. The interest has been governing from the extreme edge of not just the party, but the extreme edge of the country.
Here we are, folks. We are 4 days into the new year, and the Senate Majority Leader is at it yet once again. He is attempting to bring up voting rights legislation, what they call voting rights legislation in the United States Senate, something that has been rejected already multiple times. And he's doing it using the false narrative that our states can't protect voters' access to voting. And we know that that is a false narrative. So he's bringing up this legislation. Why? So that he can bring up the Senate filibuster. He wishes to break the Senate filibuster, whereas years ago he himself had stated that we needed to maintain the filibuster. We saw this with President Joe Biden when he was serving in the United States Senate. He had said, we need to maintain the Senate filibuster. So this attempt to federalize our voting systems is just an excuse to give Democrats the power in the United States Senate. And as you have heard time and time again, the Senate is different than the House. The Senate is here as that saucer for the teacup, so it can help the tea cool. And we need that, because we have certainly seen a whole lot of hot mess coming over from the House. What we don't need in our United States Congress is another House of Representatives.
As I've traveled around Florida the last few weeks, the thing that everybody says to me is they just can't believe D.C. works this way. I've been up here 3 years now, and we don't pass budgets. We have a Democrat Party that wants to spend every dime they can. They don't care that we have unbelievable inflation. They don't care that gas prices are up, food prices are up, housing prices are up, rent's up. And so they're just shocked that this place is so dysfunctional. They're shocked that Democrats want, like critical race theory, they want to defund the police. I can tell you, every Republican I know that's running this year, they're going to focus on why the Democrats have caused this inflation. Democrats have caused gas prices to go up, food prices to go up, rent prices to go up, why the Democrats don't want parents involved in their schools, and why Democrats don't like to fund the police and they watch this crime rate go up. So I think Democrats are going to have a horrible 22, and Republicans are going to have an unbelievable 22.
Leader McConnell.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome back. Georgia is one of the key places where there have been these questions about voting, whether or not you agree or not with what the legislature did or what the Democrats say. That said, isn't this really about 2022, 2024, and the Democrats could make an impact by making this a political issue, especially in a place like Georgia when there's a competitive race there with Senator Warnock? Isn't that really something that they could potentially swing that race based on that, and doesn't that concern your side?
Well, they're assuming what they're trying to do is popular. It's interesting that in deep blue New York, two of the issues that they would probably mandate at the federal level were actually on the ballot in New York. No excuse absentee voting was defeated. And what was the other one? Do you remember? There was another of their favorites.
In New York State?
Yeah.
In New York State?
New York State.
Yeah, there were actually two ballot measures in New York this last November. One of them was no excuse absentee voting, voted down. There was a second one that I can't think of at the moment.
ID? I think it was ID.
ID.
Ballot harvesting or ID?
It was one of the favorite ones that also went down. This was in a deep blue state, and both of these issues were related to very simple kind of ballot integrity measures that states have enacted. So they're assuming this is a popular thing to do. I would argue that it isn't. We know that if they federalize this, they will eliminate voter ID at the polls. We know they'll do that. That's overwhelmingly supported by Democrats, Republicans, and independents around the country. So I dispute the notion that this underlying bill is popular with the American people.
What about the components? I have a question for Senator Soon after. But what about the components? What about the components of the Democrats' bill that would put in protections so that it would be more difficult to make political firings of election officials, to et cetera, in states around the country?
Yeah, you know,
is that something that concerns you?
I think they assume that people who get elected to the legislatures are idiots. They get elected by the people too. Why would any legislature in America want to overturn the counting of votes? They have to get elected by those people too. The notion that some state legislature would be crazy enough to say to their own voters, we're not going to honor the results of the election is ridiculous on its face.
But so many of these election officials, have been espousing what the former president has said.
Well, speaking of the former president, he's having a press conference on Thursday, on January 6th. Given that you said he is morally and practically responsible for the attack, is it appropriate for him to have the press conference and likely spew the notion that the election was stolen?
It'll be interesting to see what he has to say.
Do you think the election was stolen?
One of the prerequisites of any appropriations bill is having bipartisan support. As we know with the BBB, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
For our Catholic viewers out there, one of the prerequisites that they like to see is pro-life provisions, the Hyde Amendment, Helms Amendment. And is that a red line still for your party?
Yeah, the Hyde language has been boilerplate for 30 or 40 years. And what I think Senator Shelby has said to Senator Leahy, basic traditional riders, no poison pills, and parity for defense and non-defense. To the extent that the Democrats are willing to meet those conditions, then I would think we'd have a chance of getting an omnibus appropriation February the 18th.
Senator Manchin also weighing in on voting rights and potentially changing filibuster rules today. Have you had any contact with him over the holiday break? I know he said he was in close talks with Democrats about potentially addressing this issue. Have you gotten any renewed assurances from Senator Manchin about not changing the filibuster?
Well, we talk to each other all the time about these issues. As we all know, the only two Democrats who seem to be resistant to breaking the Senate these days are Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. So obviously, yes, we do talk to them. All indications are that they still believe the Senate as an institution is important and doesn't need to be turned into the House, or put another way, doesn't need to be broken.